Okay, I've got a John Deere 4300. It's the reverser transmission. It's not the e-reverser, it's just a straight reverser. So on these, what's really common is that the reverser itself will become extremely loose. Almost to the point where it's so loose that it doesn't want to go into gear and stay in gear properly. So real common issue on the reverser, whether it's the 42, 43, or 44. This is one of the areas on the machine that gets a lot of usage, a lot of movement, right? You're forward, you're picking up a load of dirt and you're reversing it. So you're constantly on the reverser. And what happens is there's some bushings that are in here, and the bushings tend to go. So there's two big things on these that go. It's the bushings on the pivot point, and then there's also a gear mechanism that locks the reverser in the forward, the neutral, or the reverse position. And that gear mechanism has two pressure points that surround it, and there's a ball with a spring inside those pressure points, and the ball and the spring just hold the position where you want it, so to speak. So that wears out, and then, like I said, the two bushings on the bottom wear out. The job itself is relatively straightforward and easy to do. The only part that is kind of a pain and is a little bit tricky is to get the pins out of the shafts. The way this works, there's a bunch of U-joints on the reverser shaft. So you see like this U-joint here, there's a pin that sits there, and it's just a pressed in pin that grabs the shaft and the U-joint and keeps them together so that can all work. To get those out, they're kind of tricky, and those are hardened steel pins, so not easy to bend them. What I would recommend you do is, if you don't have a pin puller, you can actually buy, I believe, a pin puller and pusher, and that will probably be the best thing. But let's say you don't have that. What I did was I drilled these out with a drill bit, and I started with a small bit that fits just in the center of that hole, and then I worked my way up in size, and I drilled out the center of the pin, which will weaken the pin, and then you can just push it out with a pair of pliers and then replace the pin, of course. So there's two areas, two pins that you'll need to pull. There's this guy here. This is the pin you have to pull to get to the bushings, and the bushings sit right here, right? You see these copper bushings? There's a bushing in there on the top and a bushing in there on the bottom. And these two bushings go. These are the most common areas to fail. They get worn out and they go. And they look like this when they wear out. They'll break and they'll just kind of fall apart, right? So this is the bushing itself. That one's really bad. The lower one was really thin and it was bad, right? So I took these out, and they fell apart when I took them out because they were so thin and just so old. So those two bushings, you're gonna wanna change them, and they're right in there, right? There's one here on the upper and one there on the lower. And the way to get this out is you wanna take this one pin right here is all you gotta do for the bushings. And I drilled this out and replaced it. You can tell the pin is an aftermarket pin. It's just a black pin that presses in there. But once you pull that pin, this whole mechanism will drop out on the bottom. You'll drop it down, and then you can pull the bushings and then put new bushings in and put a new pin back in. That is the pin area. So that's my advice. My tip is to drill these out if you can't get them out, and you probably won't be able to because these are in there really good and they're hardened steel. If you hit this with a mallet and let's say a hole punch, right, you're probably gonna break something. So that's what I did for the pin. I just drilled it out and pulled it. The other area on the top where it's gonna fail is this area here. This is that little gear mechanism that has notches in it, and it looks like this. You can see this is the old one there. You see the notches, how they're all worn. You see the notches, how they have these gouges, and they're kind of sharp and pointy versus flat. That is where the reverser will stay in neutral in the center, and this is the reverse one, and that's the forward position. So that's how that works. And there's these little ball pins that surround it, and they have a stainless steel ball with a spring in there. And all that does is it presses down like this on the position. You got one on each side. There's two pins in there. So you're gonna wanna replace both the gear and the two pins that surround that gear to hold it in place. And to do that, you're gonna pull one pin on top. You're gonna pull this pin right here. Same process you use for the lower pin for the bushings. You're gonna take that one pin out. That's all you gotta do. You don't have to touch any other pins on this shaft. Take that one out, and then you're gonna pull a couple bolts off the back of this right here. There's a bolt there, and there's a bolt over here on this side as well. When you do that, this whole reverser will slide right out of the top. You'll take this whole thing right off the shaft. It'll be in your hands at that point. And then once you do that, then you can take that reverser with the gear, it'll be on there still, and you can deal with the reverser gear pin in a vise, right? You can just press it out and then slide the new gear on and press the original pin back on. What I would recommend is that you order the pins, new pins for the two new pins, one for the bottom on the bushing area and one pin for the top. And that way you've got new pins. I have aftermarket pins, which I use, which work just fine. But if you know you need the pins, get the right ones from John Deere, and then they'll fit perfectly. So that pretty much is it. And when you adjust the position holders, right? These little bolts with the balls in them on either side. When you adjust that, you're gonna adjust this when you put it all back together, and you're gonna seat these all the way down and then back it off 1/4 turn, right? So put them all the way down against the gear and back them off 1/4 turn. If you don't back them off 1/4 turn, that gear is gonna get torn up against these pins because the ball will be compressed. That ball will be compressed, and what happens is the gear ends up hitting the shaft on the threads versus the ball, right? The ball has a spring behind it, so it gives way and it doesn't damage the gears, which are on this guy over here, right? So that is pretty much it. And I would say total time on this job is about, give yourself 4 hours to do everything, and that's the drilling and the replacing of the pins. So 4 hours to change the bottom bushings and then the upper gear for the reverser, and that would be a fair estimate, about 4 hours. And again, the biggest tip I can offer is that those pins don't want to come out because they're really strong, been in there for a while, and you're going to have to drill them out, or if you have a pin pusher tool, you can use that as well, push them out. And once you do this, it's amazing how tight this is. There's no play in this. There's absolutely no play in this. And when you put this in forward or reverse, it clicks in and it stays in, and it clicks back and it stays in reverse. Just a total different feel when this is working properly. When these are not working properly, they go all over the place and they won't stay in gear, and then it doesn't feel like you're in gear, you're not sure. But that is what it is, simple fix. I would say total parts on this was less than $100 to fix, and all John Deere parts, all readily available within 3 or 4 days. You can get these parts. So if you're doing this, definitely recommend it. If you've got a sloppy reverser, is to fix that, and you'll be much happier with the machine, much safer, much easier to use, because you know when you're in gear, when you're in forward, when you're not in forward, and all that kind of stuff, right? So definitely recommend it. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I hope this was helpful. I wanted to add on the end of this video, because before you put all your plastic, the cowl back together and all this plastic, what you want to do, now that the reverser is working properly and everything's tight, what you want to do is adjust, at least take the machine for a test drive and make sure that the reverser doesn't need adjustment. So the way the reverser works is it just simply puts the transmission into the forward position or the reverse position, and there's an adjustment here. Over here on the side, there's this rod that goes, there's 2 set bolts or set nuts that are on each side of that rod, right? So the upper nut, you can loosen that, and then there's one on the bottom, and you want to turn this rod to adjust the position of the reverser. So the whole thing is, if you try the machine out and you put it in drive or forward and it doesn't really engage all the way, it's because the adjustment is out, right? You need to readjust the rod to put that into the right position based on the position of the reverser itself. So what you want to do is take the machine, on a flat surface, put it in forward and see if it engages properly, put it in reverse and see if it engages properly. If it doesn't, then you have to adjust you're gonna have to adjust the position of the reverser itself, which is this rod right here. And you'll see that when you put the clutch in and you move the reverser, you can see that rod go up and down. And all it is, it needs to be adjusted to the right position. If the machine works just fine, you don't have to adjust this. You're done, right? But just keep that in mind. If it's not working properly and still not going in gear all the way, it needs to be adjusted. The reverser itself needs to be adjusted, and it's that rod right there on the right side of the clutch pedal itself. You need to adjust that, okay?